All right, hello, and welcome to this GEP Live, LinkedIn Live session. Two big AI pitfalls every procurement and supply chain leader must avoid. My name is Mike Rule. I'm going to be your host and moderator for today's event. Now, to set things up a little bit, GEP recently released a white paper entitled the 2024 Procurement and Supply Chain Tech Trends Report. This paper was released with great success. We've done a number of events around it, and we wanted to set up today's event to present some additional insight and information to that report. We'll be covering two of those trends here in a little bit. But as I'm sure we're all learning, data fuels every AI initiative that we're seeing. However, without proper tools and processes for managing data and ensuring its integrity, companies are, at a severe disadvantage, especially when they're encumbered by legacy technology systems. Failure is a huge risk for these organizations. But before we get into all of that, I want to tell you a little bit about an event that GEP has coming up here. It's GEP Innovate 2024. If you are interested in attending our event, you can see some of our big speakers out there. You may have heard of a few of them, Venus Williams being our keynote address speaker this year. We're really excited to have everybody there, but please scan the QR code that's on your screen and register before the date and the expiration happens. We'd love to have you in attendance. Now, let me introduce to you our two experts from GEP. We've got Michael Clear and Raj Aggarwal. They will be taking us through a couple of the trends and innovations and modern platforms and data management tools. But before we get to all of that, Raj, I'm going to let you introduce yourself, and then you can kick it over to Mike.
Perfect. Thanks, Mike. Hi, my name is Raj Aggarwal. I'm a director here at GEP in product marketing. I work with Michael and Mike on also our product teams to bring our innovative procurement and supply chain solutions to market. I've been in the space for close to 10 years, the procurement space, and I'm really excited about the promise of AI and how quickly it's changing the landscape. So thanks for having me here today, and Michael, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Raj. Yeah, it's super excited to be here with the two of you. Awesome opportunity in front of us to discuss some really interesting topics. As Raj had mentioned, my name is Mike Clear. I'm a senior director here at GEP, and I actually lead one of the technology sales teams responsible for selling the software that GEP brings to market. I've come from companies like Oracle and Coupa in the past, and now obviously very excited to be here at GEP with the future that we have in front of us. And for today's discussion, I'm just going to be bringing perspective of what we're hearing from our clients, the things that they're saying to us, and some of the challenges that they're dealing with specifically to these two topics that we'll be discussing. So, Mike, I'll pass it back to you to sort of open us up on the first theme.
Yeah, that sounds great. As I did mention, this is coming from our Tech Trends report and the last two pitfalls. The first one that we're going to discuss today is ERP. So, Mike, you kicked it over to me. I'm going to kick this one back to you. One of the questions that we had seen, coming through different events that we're doing is trying to figure out, what are the key limitations of traditional ERP systems in managing source-to-pay process effectively. So can you give us some client perspective? And then,
Yeah, absolutely. And I can give you also perspective from coming from the ERP space before, right, with Oracle specifically, and I think some of the key themes that I'm hearing in this area specifically relate to, the limited visibility that our clients are dealing with when using an ERP as a sort of a procurement tool, right? And what I mean by that is they don't really have insight into the pre-invoice stages, right, of the procurement process. So, when it comes to details around order requisitions, vendor evaluations, purchase order generation, those kinds of things typically don't happen in an ERP. So that in itself is a big problem for a lot of the clients that we're dealing with. And then, add to that, when you think about how they're using the ERPs today, one of the bigger pain points that we see is this concept of manual data entry, right? So a lot of teams, if we just focus on let's say, for example, invoice management, right? A lot of teams having to manually enter invoice data into ERPs, and we're moving away from that, right? Clients expect an automated process at this point, right, in the evolution of the technology that we're bringing to bear. And then I would say the final thing is just around collaboration, right? We see a lot of clients with sort of siloed work streams, and an ERP certainly isn't making that easier for people who are sitting in, let's just say, procurement or accounts payable, etc., to be able to work together. Whereas custom designed procurement systems like the ones that GEP bring to bear obviously have that in mind, right? And trying to make this idea of collaboration a little bit more seamless. Raj, thoughts?
Yeah, Michael, I almost don't even know where to start, right? Because there are many different limitations. I think you mentioned some very key ones there. But frankly, ERPs just weren't designed for procurement professionals. They weren't designed for them in mind. So ERPs are always complex. They're very complex to roll out. They're difficult to integrate, sometimes very difficult to use. So it's really a massive undertaking, right, to implement this type of software. There's a lot of planning. There's a lot of change management that really gets required to get these ERPs up and running. And then when you look at sort of integrations across these systems, it can be very difficult, right? Of course, trying to bring in and ingest the data, be able to map the data, and then actually being able to use it. And on top of it, you see sort of the user interface and the whole experience. It's not that intuitive, and I think that a lot of times requires a lot of training. And as we all know, right, user adoption becomes a huge issue, and frankly, that's the number one issue with most software today and actually implementing them. So it can be complicated for a new user, and if it's not intuitive, the software's not intuitive, then they really can't get to any real value out of it. So I think that's the first piece. The second is sort of, they're very costly to maintain and upgrade and change. So they've been very historically expensive, and anytime a change is needed, right, you need to go back to the provider, you get in a long queue, and their ability to support or fix that type of change, or even provide some kind of a workaround, right, is a lengthy process. So they're known to be slow, pretty inflexible, and so the innovation just isn't as quick as you would need it as a procurement professional, especially in this dynamic market. So the net result is you don't have what you need, and that puts you really in a bind, right? So I think those are two of the main things there. And then I think the third one is they're really not focused on centralization. So there's a multitude of different systems, data spread across multiple ERPs. These siloed processes that are coming in data from these across different business units or geographies really make it difficult to really understand and then control spend, right? Align with your KPIs, see what kind of projects are in flight. I mean, so how do you make improvements, right, through those projects? And then get the visibility, I think, Michael, as you kind of mentioned. So the other thing is that the analytics don't really extend across the S2P processes or even across different domains, right? We start to talk about an ecosystem with different type of systems and domains. And we'll get to orchestration in a minute, but that's the type of thing that makes cost and the suppliers and the contracts and the categories extremely difficult to be effective and manage those effectively in any organization.
Yeah, maybe just one point to add there, Raj. I think, and this is just coming off a conversation I literally had this morning, the extensibility of platforms like we have in the market to be able to handle complex scenarios on a global scale. That's the other piece that people don't necessarily think about, right? We're talking with clients with entities on different continents, and each of them operate in their own unique way, right? So ERPs have been known to be completely inflexible in being able to serve those different entities in a unique way, whereas what we're able to do today is present a platform that's obviously highly configurable to support all of these people in the different countries that they're in, but to allow them to have a process that's almost standard for the business itself. So yeah, just another point I thought I'd add to the comment you make there.
Yeah, I think, Michael, that whole concept of sort of having a command and control center, if you will, right? Know what's happening sort of in real time across the globe, as you said, right? Throughout that life cycle, I think is pretty key. You know, it reminds me of a time when I worked in finance, and at that time they had all of these different business units were in control of their own P&L. And what they found was it got out of control really quickly. And so they had to bring that center of excellence back to the corporate headquarters and sort of help in terms of that overall view. And I think that's what a control and command center kind of gives you, that type of view. So you can make an impact on the business and see what's changing. So it's a good point. Michael R.?
All right, guys, thank you. Great limitations, but let's shift this a little bit. Let's go to some key advantages. So, Mike, I'm going to first hit you with this question, but what are some of the key advantages of modern procurement platforms over traditional ERPs, and how do they contribute to greater agility and resilience?
It's this is kind of the holy grail question, because this is what everybody wants, right? It's I think what it comes down to, I see two major themes in this. Usually it's about increasing productivity, without a shadow of doubt. It's a lot of what happens behind the scenes. How can we make it easy for people to automate tasks that are absolutely manual today, right? Throughout the whole source to pay process, right? And people sort of tend to take for granted the actual value that sits in creating more efficiency for staff. I mean, it's tough to say that you could put a dollar value against hours saved, but there's certainly a concept there to be, considered. And then clearly the second piece is the savings, right? So how could you use a platform to support people to sort of remove them from doing manual tasks, and by doing so, actually giving them the opportunity to do their jobs, right? Which is to think strategically about procurement and the function of procurement, right? And if you're doing that, what you'll naturally see is the outcome is that they're able to focus on driving cost savings with various projects that they're engaged in, right? So move them away from being manual into moving them more into sort of like a strategic role in a way, right, Mike? That's the one concept. And then the second concept is sort of connected to what we just spoke about with regards to the ERP side, but it's how quickly you can deploy a source to pay technology compared to maybe an ERP solution, right? So people always talking about time to value, right? And reducing complexity. And I think that's the other thing that we need to talk about when we think about key advantages is you're not just supporting your IT organization with deploying a piece of technology that's going to operationally improve the way things are working, but at the same time, you're going to please your CFO because you'll be able to get the return on investment in most cases from what we're seeing within 12 months. Raj?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right there, Michael. I see it as sort of three advantages of modern platforms. The first one, modern platforms are very focused on innovation and speed. I think you mentioned that in terms of speed, right? But they're fast to adopt the new technologies that are coming in, the latest and greatest, right? So AI, Gen AI, RPA, et cetera. These technologies is what's driving those innovative capabilities, right, across procurement and supply chain. And IA has really emerged as that cornerstone of any kind of digital transformation initiative that companies are trying to do today. So with AI and Gen AI, that whole user experience, right, being able to access data, generate a report, it's all at your fingertips. The ability for these modern platforms to intake your request, right, from a Google-like search bar, which everybody's very familiar with, and get the information you need and automatically route you to where you need to go quickly. It's quite unprecedented where we've come in the last 12 months. Actually, the automation of processes, the access to embedded analytics and data, is now orchestrated by AI, right? In the background, it all just kind of happens, and it's very seamless to the user. These are the type of technologies that are coming in to modern procurement platforms that are really speeding up the cycle times, right? And so the architecture is much more flexible with these type of tools, where it can ingest all kinds of data, structured, unstructured, internal, external systems, multiple domains, and bring all that real-time capability with sort of like alerts, notifications, those type of things to the forefront. And so it makes it very easy then to view what's happening, take action as needed. You might want to launch a new project or plan a change of direction, collaborate with your suppliers accordingly. Anyway, make realistic action plans that you can actually achieve. And so all of this is being leveraged through AI, automation, and analytics. And that really is what's allowing companies then to execute on their strategic plan and making sure that procurement managers are agile and responsive and also resilient to any risks that may arise. So I think that's the second point, or actually the first point. The second one is really around modern platforms. They're focused on S2P value and outcomes. So typically when you look at ERPs, they're very, very much focused on that downstream. So the finance, AP side of things, not so much around that upstream, right? And so what we're seeing is that transactional nature doesn't really get you to the strategic capability that you can get when you look at sort of the S2C or the sourcing, contracts, and supplier management side. If you think about supplier management, we're talking about the information in supply around suppliers. You're talking about the relationship and being able to drive more value out of that. You're talking about the performance, the risk, the collaboration, the innovation. So there's so much built around that supplier or those suppliers and how you manage those. That's really where a lot of value lies. So ERPs typically can't help bring that to bear in the way that a modern procurement platform can. And so I think that's, if you're trying to get visibility and control and compliance, you've got to focus very much on that upstream area. And I think the third one is focused on the sustainability. And I would go as far as to say supplier sustainability, right? So with the environment being the way that it is, right? Inflation, supply chain disruptions, geopolitical issues or wars, right? All of this stuff is popping up and it keeps disrupting what's happening in procurement and supply chain. So you need responsive technology, right? To be able to consistently monitor and track whether it's the supply, the suppliers across the supply chain and all the associated elements to be able to take in those business requirements, understand those patterns, right? And then effectively the risk and the cost and the movements in the market. All of those are the type of things that you really need to focus on to be able to stay ahead of the curve. So I think the environment continues to be challenging, and I think it's driving really a high interest in these type of solutions that can balance cost, risk, and sustainability initiatives. And then in terms of sustainability, I think it's really how you get that long-term success, because it's how you can smooth these uncertain patterns in not just the short term, but in that longer term. And that again gets back to supplier value management, right? And how that can really be managed. So I think those are the three things that I would say are crucial in terms of modern platforms today.
All right. Thanks, Raj. It's kind of funny, as you were mentioning, crucial, and that's kind of ties into our next question here. Why is it going to be crucial for businesses to prioritize adopting modern digital platforms over remodeling, the legacy ERPs?
Yeah, Mike, it's I think we've touched on this a couple of times in different ways, right? But the modern workforce just absolutely needs to be efficient and as productive as they possibly can at all times, right? And so when you think about the fundamentals behind how some of these platforms are designed, it's specifically designed with a user interface that's supposed to be easy, right, to learn and to navigate, right? So if you're using these kinds of technologies, that's purpose built for that reason, I think naturally you're going to see gains in efficiency and productivity, right, compared to the clunkiness that you typically see with ERPs. And talking about clunkiness, I mean, legacy ERPs, as we all know, typically are very rigid and difficult to modify, right? So when you're looking at why you should prioritize this system over redesigning a potential ERP, I mean, I think that these SaaS platforms that we're bringing to market now are purpose built for the changing digital environment that we're dealing with, right? So if you look at just the use cases that we're launching around concepts like AI or updating different workflows because of low code, no code, we'll chat about that a little bit later, right? But all of these things are already being built into these custom platforms, and legacy ERP just isn't designed for those reasons, right? And so that's why we're seeing a clear distinction right now from our clients saying, okay, totally get it. We know we need to go down the route of saying we need a purpose-built solution for those reasons that I mentioned. That's what I'm hearing most, Raj. I don't know if you have any thoughts on this.
Yeah, Michael. So, if I just take a moment here, right? So when I look at sort of all the market surveys and kind of what the market is telling us, right? How these leading procurement organizations can really measure, for example, category managers, right? So if you look at the top 5 or 6 issues, right? So cost savings and avoidance, of course, no surprise there, is number 1, right? Number 2, we've talked a little bit about it here, supplier risk and disruption. The quality assurance coming in as number 3, right? So I'm if you're doing direct procurement, for example, right, that quality and that piece is extremely important. Speed and efficiency, I think we talked about a little bit, sustainability, and then really business alignment and customer experience sort of round out that top 5 or top 6, right? So when you talk about getting value, right? So, even if you just are collaborating with your suppliers and you want to make sure that your supply is steady, that's like huge in terms of the value that it delivers, right? But now if you can start to really deliver in terms of being able to work with them on innovative projects, right? Quality assurance, there's a whole new level of supplier value you can get to. So, understanding risk, how to deal with suppliers, supply chain, and be able to navigate all of these and collaborate around sort of an N-tier supplier, right? I think most organizations have been very focused on sort of a level 1 supplier versus sort of the deeper supplier, and get to that holy grail. I think you mentioned, Michael, right? Cost, risk, and sustainability. You alluded to that before. So, when you think about an organization that's trying to get better and trying to get more efficient, right, and be able to execute on these strategies, it's supplier value, it's the better outcomes that will come and actually automatically boost and maximize your ROI. So if you were to ask me about what the crucial businesses should be prioritizing in a platform, my response is pretty simple. Time to value, ROI, right? It's making an investment. You're making an investment in technology and software. And it's the most important thing is to be able to get the outcome and a quick return on that. Otherwise, you're looking at another tool, it just doesn't work, and then you got to start all over again. That's not going to happen with ERPs. I think pundits pretty much agree that going outside of the ERP to get a more flexible, modern platform is the way to go. I think that's pretty much analysts across the globe really think that providing sort of that breadth and depth that a procurement organization needs in one suite with a flexible data model. I know we're going to talk about that data model in a bit here. That's what's going to bring that unprecedented value and return in just a few months. So I think time to value is number 1. The second is the competitive advantage. The software just has to work. It has to work that you want it the way you want it to work. It's got to be configurable. It's got to have workflows and extensibility, as you mentioned, Michael, that can be updated and changed as really needed, right? So self-service like this, that's not possible with ERPs today. And I think that's another big advantage that modern platforms have. And actually really being able to embed sort of AI and Gen AI into these platforms is, and leverage sort of the intake orchestration capability that you're seeing. That's the adage that we talk about when we say it just works. It can now actually be realized. So procurement teams that want to maintain a competitive advantage should really be looking at a modern platform that can take advantage of AI-based orchestration and be able to enable sort of the use cases across systems and domains to keep them competitive. So I think that's the number two. And then the last one is really, as I mentioned, sort of the business and stakeholder alignment. Right. I can't understate the importance of visibility and collaboration. I think, Michael, you mentioned that, and I'm mentioning it again, right? Effective communication, right? Almost every survey that I've seen, consistent communication and sharing amongst teams for strategic alignment is one of the biggest issues, right? So that's where modern tools are very focused on that, and all the stakeholders that are involved can collaborate. One hand needs to talk to the other, or else good execution is just not going to happen, right?
Yeah, and then kind of scary in some of the scenarios that we're walking into, Raj, is, that, to your point, the lack of communication between these different departments, and there's no given reason. It's maybe just the way that the business has operated for many, many years. But the scary part of it is that we're seeing instances where, people who are in lead of the procurement function, they have no idea how much they're spending, as an example, right? And it's because they've relied traditionally on an ERP to be able to guide them through that process, right? So these things that are you think expected in modern business, that's just not there, which is kind of eye-opening, especially with some of the clients that you think would have this turned on immediately.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
All right, guys. Well, I think we've covered this ERP topic pretty well over the last 30 minutes. I want to transition into the second pitfall, which is data innovation, because we got to give data innovation a lot of love too. So let's go with this first question that we had received. Why is data analysis and leveraging it critical for supply chain and procurement leaders? Seems like this is a softball, but Mike, I'm going to let you go with that one first.
Yeah, this is some low-hanging fruit, Mike. Thank you for that question. Yeah, again, it's one of the things that we're seeing tremendous innovation around, right? This ability to ingest data and how to use it. But I think what's really, really interesting and with the clients that we're working with right now, the way that they're thinking about it, right? I think there's three categories that I typically see them sort of visualize the way that they're going to be using data, right? And for me, one of the number one things that I see is their ability to be better at decision making, right? That's an obvious statement, right? Having the most up-to-date and most relevant information when you need it and how you need it at your fingertips, it's going to make you a better decision maker all around, right? So whether you're involved with supplier performance or whether you're involved with analyzing spend patterns within the business, having that data is just clearly going to make you more efficient in decision making, right? And that's a huge advantage if you're in a competitive market space. I think the second point you want to look at is just generally speaking about cost savings and efficiency, right? So having that data available, and this is another area that sometimes blows my mind, is clients not being able to see, right, the spend that's going out in the business, and having full visibility on all different parts of the business, when they could be losing out on massive opportunities to save a tremendous amount of money if they had that data, right? And then one that's now starting to gain a lot of momentum too is on the risk mitigation side, and specifically with suppliers, right? What suppliers could be a risk in your business? If you're some of these companies that we partnering with right now, 15,000, 20,000, 25,000 suppliers that they have to manage on a global scale, do you have supplier risk scores on them? Do you have the ability to predict what issues might come up with them? Do you have contingency plans for if something does go wrong? And having the data at hand is going to be able to arm you to sort of protect yourself against all of that. So again, for me, risk mitigation, huge, cost savings opportunities, huge, and then just generally decision making, right? Like be better at making decisions so that you could advance ahead of your competition.
Yeah, I think Michael, you covered that really, really well, right? To me, again, it's all about data. It's how you use it. It's how much data you have, how well that data is aggregated and cleansed, right? How the system and you can best use it, visualize it, and as you said, sort of get to the right decision point quickly and take action, right? So in this day and age, things that are changing so fast, you need real-time information. You need it to come to you, right? You don't need to be able to go search for it, right? If something happens like prices go up or a contract is expiring or there's a new risk factor that's going to affect your supply, then you should automatically be alerted to that, right? And there should be some type of a recommendation that says, okay, here's the change you should take that is going to try to keep things whole, right? Or sustainable, or really just hedge, right? Any impact. So I think we've been doing this thing on our mobile phones for forever, right? Now you're starting to see with the advent of AI tools that the same kind of software can really be at your beck and call, and that's how you're going to deliver these kind of outcomes. So yeah, I think data is the absolute key here.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Hey, I forgot to mention this at the top of the hour, but you know what? We always have a chance to do this. I don't want to be the only person asking all these questions. So if anyone in the audience has a question, please drop it into the chat. We do have people moderating that, and they can get the questions to me. And if we have time, we'll be sure to answer that during this session. That being said, though, let's talk a little bit more about some challenges. And what challenges do organizations face without proper data and analytic management in supply chain and procurement?
Mike, it's a funny question, Mike, because it's literally the opposite of what Raj and I were just talking about, right? Like we were talking about, hey, you need to have visibility. Well, clearly you're not going to have visibility, right? So what is the continued impact for you on your business, right? I mean, it's interesting to see, and this is really what's happening in a lot of the scenarios that we're dealing with our clients. We don't ask about, and if I just bring it back to the technology for a second, we don't ask about features and functions when we discuss opportunity with these prospects that we're dealing with. We're asking about pain points that they have. So a question around like, do you have inventory management problems? Is that something that's real to you? Or do you have, increased costs because you can't identify opportunities for savings with some of the suppliers that you have? Or what kind of risks do you have with your suppliers? Do you even know, right? Like that's kind of what we get into when we start discussing opportunity with clients, because in a lot of the cases, they just don't know what they don't know because they in fact don't have the data to begin with, right? So to answer that question in a simple way, literally the opposite. But these are really good pain points that do exist today with the clients that we discuss opportunities with.
Yeah, Michael, I would say, without the proper data and analytics, right, you're just always going to be behind the curve, right? I mean, that's the fact, right? So modern platforms today don't just look at historical data. They actually look at predictive data, right? So from the market intelligence, supplier performance, supplier intelligence, real-time cost data, third-party ESG data, risk type data, all of that kind of data, right, is the kind of intelligence and the empowerment of users with these type of platforms. Without that, you're always just going to be behind the curve. And, that makes it very, very difficult in terms of control, right? And it can be devastating on your business, right, to be making uninformed decisions that might just be a cost issue. It could be contract obligations. It could be risks, supply shortages. You just can't control anything without the data, right? And I think that you'll always just be chasing, your competition if you don't have information and analytics that's worthy. So they're critical to achieve your goals. And the idea really is to stay ahead of the curve, and you have to make the right investments, right, to be able to do that. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. So let's talk a little bit about features. What features should an ideal data and analytics platform for supply chain and procurement include to address some of these challenges that we just talked about?
Good question. I think we typically see this idea of, obviously, in order to get the data you need to make the decision, you typically have to integrate with a couple of other systems, right, within your organization. So the key there is, if you're picking a technology for this, it needs to be able to integrate real time with some of the other core data systems you have, whether that's an ERP data or some third-party vendor providing you with information about suppliers, whatever the case might be. We see clients with multiple different integration points. Those things need to be easy to connect to your platform in order to be able to gather that data and be able to use it efficiently, right? And then I think the other thing in terms of features, Mike, that you were talking about is specifically related to how can we improve collaboration and decision-making amongst the people who are actually using the tool, right? So something like, for example, and this was a great story, we were in the room where a CFO was sitting down with, the people that we were discussing an opportunity with, and he came up with this notion of how can I get my team to be better enabled to, do self-serve, right? How can they get analytics without having to send 20 or 30 different emails and having to pull data from a spreadsheet and all of that, right? So having individuals within specific job functions, giving them the ability to do self-serve and find the information they need, that's something that's going to be critical in how to look at these systems, right? And then I think the other piece to that is the collaboration and dashboards and reports, right? So how could you facilitate communication and information and sharing that amongst internal teams and even external partners? So for me, those are some of the key areas: improve collaboration, decision making, and basically end-to-end visibility.
Yeah, Michael, I'll add to that. There's a couple of things that I would point out as well. I think one is a centralized data model, right? So I think with the way that a lot of companies are working today, right? So there's a lot of data, it's all over the place. Being able to actually have that data in a centralized place for easy accessibility, allow your sort of AI to do its work in terms of democratization of that data, and then be able to bring that through the seamless procurement process, right? So if I'm stepping through, I want to be able to see, what step I'm at, what's the data that would be pertinent in terms of intent, right, for what I'm trying to do. So a configurable end-to-end workflow that has embedded analytics that takes you through the procurement processes, it makes it very easy, but can pull from this centralized data model so that you can go from one process to another, one step to another, make the right decisions, right? All of this is now being enabled by what we call low code, no code, right? And so the ability to even create that workflow for yourself where you can have the right data or the pertinent data attributes or elements that you think are important can all be done with a drag and drop, right? And it's very, very simple today with these kind of new platforms. It's something that you wouldn't see with ERPs or other older platforms. So I think those are two areas that I think are really big, and really that ability as well. I think, Mike, you mentioned this in terms of being able to generate reports. You can do that now with an AI-powered conversational chat. So I can get information at any time, wherever I am in the software, and I can ask for it. I want to pull a report. I want to pull a specific kind of report. I want to pull something specific to a specific supplier, region, whatever. And very, very simple for me to do that, get the information, and then move forward, right? So I think those are the type of features that are key and speeding things up, but also allowing and empowering the user to really get their job done. So.
Raj, I could not have asked for a better segue or to be set up for this next question, because I really feel like this is going to be something that is going to be playing a bigger part, and we know it's definitely a hot topic. and that's when it comes to AI and ML. So, honestly, I'd love to know, how can AI and ML powered tools enhance decision making and efficiency in supply chain and procurement?
Yeah, I think, wow, yeah, this is a big topic, right? I mean, for the last, what is it, 2 years or so, it feels like that's been on the tip of everybody's tongues, right? AI, machine learning, et cetera, et cetera. And so, yeah, Mike, thank you for the question. It's a big one. Really, I think there's a couple of things, but before I get into, when you talk about enhanced decision making or improved efficiency, I've got a couple of examples that I'll bring to bear. But interestingly enough, I'm hearing so much about the real world struggles that people have. So yeah, of course, we want to be better with, decision making and all of those kinds of things using AI and ML. But the reality is that a lot of the organizations that we talk to today actually have problems with people in seat in these various functions, right? Being not as experienced, right? So a lot of the traditional workforce, the experts who've been there for a long time, are getting to a point where they're retiring and moving on, and the new crop coming in. And the fact is that the market just out there is starving for individuals that are actually experts in the source to pay function itself, right? So one of the things that I wanted to mention on this call is, what are we doing to empower the people who are in seat at these companies? How could they be better at their jobs? And maybe take a junior category manager as an example and make them a mid-level to almost senior category manager, just because they're using the technology to support them in that, right? So as an example, we were talking about, you were saying like if you use an example for AI and ML and how can that improve enhanced decision making, right? So if we go on that category manager example, gone are the days where you have to scour multiple different websites to find news on various products that you're tracking or indices that you're focused on, or supply chain risks that are out there. In today's world, you want that information, as we discussed earlier, at the tips of your fingers. And so what I'm saying is that a junior category manager now has that information immediately in front of them and can make better decisions around accurate forecasting, as an example, right? That's one huge thing that we're seeing today. So empowering and getting the people that are in seat to be better. That's one. And so we use this example of a category manager, but what about somebody who's a supplier, in supply management, the actual managing of vendors, managing of suppliers who support your business? How can you use AI to help analyze their profiles, the past performance that they've delivered, right? The market conditions, and maybe think about recommendations, right? How do I find different suppliers that look like this or could be good for our business? Again, that could instantly be done by using technology like AI and machine learning. That wasn't there before. And then maybe if we could just talk about sort of the efficiency side of it too, right? We've spoken about this at length now, but this concept of automating tasks, clearly you're going to be more efficient using AI and machine learning. So we can see things like creation of an invoice, invoice processing, all of that data entry can be automated by AI, right? So you're creating an opportunity to be more efficient. And then finally, streamlining workflows, right? We're seeing scenarios now where AI can identify where bottlenecks sit within your S2P process and how you could sort of change your workflows to be more efficient, right? So those are just two use cases. And I got to tell you that at the rate of what we're seeing right now, use cases are coming out like you won't believe. And GEP itself is, jonesing to be at the top of the list of bringing some of these use cases to the market. And the fun thing about being involved right now and speaking to clients is their ideas are coming from issues that they're dealing with in their companies today. And we're getting a chance to help them out by using AI and bringing those use cases to other clients that we have as well, right? So fast moving environment, lots of change happening, but at the end of the day, multiple different use cases, which we just haven't even touched on, that can help you with efficiency and enhanced decision making. Raj?
Yeah, there's so many use cases, Michael. I mean, everywhere you turn, there's another potential use case. I think the biggest thing is people are trying to sort of understand which use cases not just help them, but actually, can provide some kind of return on their investment. And I think it's hard to say, oh, this one feature, or you should pay for this to particularly do that. I think you have to look at it a little bit more holistically in terms of what you're really getting. When I say just the software just works, the idea is you're leveraging that technology to do all the things you would think that the software can automatically already do, right? You talked about automation, right? Autonomous style processes, filling out a form, automatic filling out a form, right? So the reality is a lot of those use cases are actually already there, Michael. I mean, I can effectively, go into my system, go to a Google search bar, say, this is what I want. It goes in, it knows my intent, it knows my past behavior. It automatically puts me into that track unless I want to change that, right? So these type of intake, in terms of intaking sort of what the person or the user wants to do, and then being able to sort of orchestrate in the background with AI what needs to be there. All that data you talked about, consolidating all of that data, that just happens. It happens so quickly because there's so much data to go through, right? The model has to enable it. The data has to be ingested. It has to be harmonized. All of that, and it kind of just sort of happens. It pops up on the screen. You don't know that those things are necessarily happening. So I think we have to look at it, and leaders who are looking to buy this software, they should look at software, that has the enablement to be adding these use cases. It's really going to be a race, right, between all providers. Today I have 5, tomorrow the other guy has 10, now I have 15. That is not the way to judge a provider. It's, can this platform embed the AI capability? Does it have that? Or is it a plug and play type of thing, right? Or now there needs to be this big transformation, or this big development thing that needs to happen. All this mapping has to happen. All that is inefficient and takes time. So I think what you're really seeing with platforms today is the ability to intake the request, process or automatically process that request, harmonize that workflow that's specific and personalized to that particular person. Of course, the reason it's ML is because it keeps learning. Every time you come in, every time you want to do something, it adjusts, right? That's what's speeding up the technology. I think if you look at productivity and efficiency as a category, if you will, I think that starts to justify, the investment, because now I can add use cases as they come in. And software like ours, for example, it's all there. We release a new feature, you can turn it on, turn it off whenever you want to, right? And push it, right, across all your users. So I think there's so many use cases. I think contracts is a big area that we're seeing as kind of a leader in terms of AI capabilities, right? You mentioned supplier and recommendations of suppliers. I think that's really huge. But again, it's all backed by the data that's underneath that. And that's what's driving the efficiency and the decision making, because now it's not about clicks. It's about, right? It's not about clicks anymore, right? We were trying to minimize clicks. Now we're trying to improve the input process and then take that and process it. So I think overall the benefits are huge, right? So the workflows, the streamlined and friction workflows, the empowered user, the democratized, intelligence that's there, the synchronized and aligned actions that just happen holistically end to end across these type of tools. And that's really exciting. It's really, really exciting time.
Yeah, and awesome. I don't want to jump ahead too far, Mike, but maybe, in connection with what Raj just mentioned there, and looking at some of the audience questions, maybe we can tap into a few of those, because I think there's some really interesting questions around, and you just touched on it, Raj. One of the questions I think that was asked by Charlie was, where is the best place for you to sort of start to introduce AI into procurement? We've got opinions on it, but what I'd really ask you to think about is, look at your business, right? Let's analyze the way that your business operates today, and then we can make a recommendation. But to Raj's point a little bit earlier, I think a lot of the low-hanging fruit that we've seen so far is in the contract management piece, right, Raj, where there's a big opportunity for the business to take more ownership on getting the contract with a net new supplier to a certain point, right? Whereas before you'd have to engage legal so early in that entire process. How can you now utilize a tool like AI to support you with going as far as adding terms and conditions or redlining documents, getting suggestions from AI, what should be there, what should not be there, based on other contracts that look the same in your organization, right? And getting through that entire process before you hand it over to legal for a final look through and blessing before a contract is signed. Charlie, that's one perfect example, but certainly, again, it depends on just where your business is and where the biggest opportunity for efficiency lies, because it could be anywhere from a category manager, a sourcing manager, a contract manager, through to AP and invoice automation. All of those different areas there have massive efficiency gain opportunities with AI. Contract management just happens to stand out for a lot of them as a starting point.
Yeah, Michael, you talked a lot about the pre-contract phase and into contract, right? But then there's the post cycle, right? So that's why I mentioned sort of obligations, right? How do we track those? How do we make sure that they're being complied to? That can have a huge effect on businesses for sure, right? I think the other one is really supplier, right? I talked about supplier management and supplier value. I think there are just so many use cases there, but even having the simple enough one where you're recommending a supplier based on data, right? Specific data could be, like you said, performance data. It could be ESG data. It could be any of those, right? And when we talk about most companies that are very focused on their tier one versus going deeper, right? They're probably going to want to keep those suppliers around, right? So the ability to go discover and try to see what's out there and be able to do that, and then slowly be able to sort of change maybe volume that you have or specifics with the current customer, or just bring another one on board, right, quite easily so that you can sort of hedge your bets. Those are particular areas that I think are extremely valuable to start with as well.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. I know we've got about 5-6 minutes left in this session, and I know there's a couple more sections I wanted to cover with you guys. First one is ESG. Why is ESG data integration so crucial, and how can it support sustainable practices in the supply chain ecosystem?
That's a good question, and I'm going to leave the majority of the answer for Raj because I know he's a quasi-expert in this ESG concept and topic.
Yes, he is.
But no, just jokes aside, I think, again, this is another topic that, even pre-AI has been massive. And it's this idea of the pressure coming from boards who are now under this I don't know, there's this drive, like clearly, even in all of their earnings calls, forecast calls, where they're talking about what they are doing as an organization to support these kinds of initiatives, right? I was personally thinking that those pressures would come down a lot quicker than they have to the sort of procurement and supply chain functions. And in some aspects, it certainly has, right? When you look at certain concepts around supplier management and making sure you're compliant with regard to certain ESG standards that your company holds. But that's kind of sort of slowed down over the last few months where that was the number one question we got. Now maybe that's the number 3 question we got. And I'm not sure exactly why that is, but that doesn't mean it's not there. And that doesn't mean it's not going to continue to become a priority maybe at some point in the future again. I think there's just been so much emphasis that's been placed on saving money and being more efficient, right? And that's the priority for the business and the actual business users right now. ESG is definitely going to be a nice to have at this point, I think, in my opinion, and what I'm hearing from clients, but it's not going to go away because guess what? Your CFO and president will still be talking about it on the earnings call coming this quarter. Raj?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think with what we've been seeing, right, post-pandemic, pandemic, post-pandemic, right, Cost has always remained the number one thing. I think the supply disruption, as I mentioned, I think is sort of number two, but it's hey, can I go ahead and get the supply? They're less worried about what type of supply that is, right? Or does that supply meet those standards? I think you've seen most of the push sort of in the, in Europe, with a lot of that. You've seen some maybe progress in California and the US. So I think until those things start to come, companies are sort of planning and asking about it. As you said, it's part of the strategy. But I think the other piece to this, a lot of companies are very much, quarter over quarter. And with inflation being high, needing to hedge that, those kinds of things, that has really taken precedence, right? Whereas if I'm looking at a sustainability strategy that's a lot longer term, I've got time, right, to try to do that. So I think enforcing these policies and making it normal part of the procurement process is really what's going to hold sort of the buyers, right, your users, and the suppliers and their suppliers as we look beyond that sort of tier one accountable for it. And I think this whole concept of a collaborative multi-tier network that's there, not a transactional network like you've seen typically with sort of SAP, but more this multi-collaborative type of network. I think as these start to come on, you're going to see more and more around emissions, CO2 reduction, that kind of thing, and being really just a normal piece of your regular compliance. But yeah, I think it certainly takes the third leg behind cost and risk. Sure.
Awesome. We got a couple minutes left here, but I know this was something that I was actually really interested in too. What does the self-service and low code, no code mean for the power users?
Yeah, and I'll try and answer this quickly, Mike. Along with ESG, AI, machine learning, intake management being, buzzwords on the street, this is the other one, right? Low code, no code. And I'm so excited about what's happening here at GEP just for a start because of our redevelopment and platform. And this is a pain point we hear a lot from clients, right? It's this, I cannot configure the system to meet the needs of what our business needs, even at the business user level, right? So I guess what low code, no code is bringing to the market right now is this idea of saying, hey, if you're sitting in AP and you want to change the workflow of how an invoice is approved, go ahead. You could just drag and drop and get that done. Whereas before, you'd literally have to pick up the phone to whoever your provider was, try and get somebody on the line, and 24, 48 hours, goodness forbid, a week later, you're actually getting that work done for you because they had to custom change it themselves in the back end, right? So this concept of less reliance on IT for simple changes in just workflow, that's one thing. And the second thing is, in a lot of instances, we haven't yet built into our own product specific functionalities or needs that the client has, right? Now, a client can actually go by themselves and develop an application in the system because of low code, no code. Again, dragging and dropping to be able to get what they need, right? And this is a game changer because now the ownership is on the business user and they are the ones that are driving change and transformation because of that capability, not IT.
I tend to think of it as sort of this, when we came out with appliances and software where you could sort of build this stack of functionality and do all these things, I always said, just give me the jigsaw puzzle. You give me the building blocks and just let me put those together the way that I want to, right? We're at that level in terms of architecture today, which I think, as you said, Mike, has really changed the game, right? So it's not so much about, hey, I can do it myself. It's if I need to do it and I need something right away, I can do it real quick and I don't have to go through, this large hassle with IT to get it approved for everybody because I can easily push it right back, right? And it's literally a game changer. The other area that it helps is with business partners, implementation, those kinds of things that can get sped up as well. And I think the last area is verticalization. So if you're in a specific industry and you maybe have a specific need or specific use case that you need, that has not been developed again by a provider, you can quickly do that and continue to operate your business effectively.
All right. Thank you guys very much. Raj, Mike, great session here. Thank you to all the audience members and the questions that came in. I know we kind of ran out of time to get to some of those questions, but we'll try and follow up as quickly as possible. We will make this available on LinkedIn as an on-demand video. We're also going to make this available as a podcast on the GEP Knowledge Bank. And once again, I'm going to give a shameless plug for GEP Innovate. Please come check out our event page. Hopefully entice you guys to sign up and come to New York City to see Venus Williams and the rest of our fantastic speaker line. Raj and Mike will also be there, so you can be sure to pester them about some other pitfalls that you may be experiencing with your technology and procurement and supply chain. So with that being said, gentlemen, thank you all very much. Have a fantastic day.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.